Through his documentation, Thucydides sought to give us an understanding of events that may possibly happen again, for such is the human condition, as he acknowledges. How prophetic that statement holds when one recalls the plague of Athens and compares it to our own uncertain times. What might we learn then from observing the Athenian populace? Should we praise them for how they handled the deadly plague? Perhaps we should invoke Plato and Aristotle so we may gain insight regarding this topic. Both philosophers sought to teach us what is required to be in a state of happiness. Plato instructs that justice, as a prerequisite to true bliss, involves regulating the tripartite soul. Likewise, Aristotle notes that to live virtuously is to find the golden mean of the myriad virtues. He also teaches us that, as being distinct from other animals, human beings require more than just base pleasures. He reminds us, too, that we humans are social creatures. Plato likewise speaks of our relation to wider society. The justice of the society reflects the justice of its citizens, so he claims. With their views espoused, I implore you not to praise the Athenian populace for their response to the plague. Rather, we must blame Athens for making their own situation worse than it had to be. Before I prove this, we must first recognize just how unavoidable the plague really was. We read that the plague spread fast and without warning, as if it were a forest fire rampaging through unsuspecting foliage and fauna. Regardless of health, all who were in its sights were struck with the disease. Nature does not distinguish in its terrifying awe. No treatment or cure was powerful enough to combat this invading force, and all defenses were futile against the plague's cruel, iron-fisted regime. Before assessing how Athens responded to this terror, we must first answer the question, what is to be considered honorable? Well, it certainly holds true that the happy life is honorable. And from the philosophers, we infer that the happy life is the product of balancing one's thoughts and character. This balance will require prudence. With this criteria defined, it is evident why the Athenians share blame with the plague for their grim situation. Firstly, there was a breakdown in society at large. Few bothered to bury the dead, and those who did chose to very hastily. Imagine then, all of the corpses left to rot in the open streets. Imagine how messy and unorganized those few burials must have been. Secondly, there was a breakdown in moral perseverance. People engaged carelessly in base pleasures without regard to justice, for surely nothing mattered anymore. Well, to that, Aristotle would have chastised the Athenians for forgetting that higher pleasures exist. This leads itself into the final act, the breakdown of relationships. Most Athenians stopped caring for the sick, abandoning them to slowly and painfully die alone. Imagine just how much that would fling anyone into despair. The only honorable Athenians were those who, despite the obvious cost, chose to stay with and comfort their dying friends until death inevitably took its share. You may ask regarding those whom I blame, was it possible for those Athenians to have acted any differently? Well, even in a hopeless situation, we all still have a choice on how we choose to react. Fear and indulgence are definitely options. However, the Athenians, very much like Achilles before the death of his dear friend Patroclus, neglected the value of acting on empathy and courage instead. Much like the plague, COVID-19 has proved itself unavoidable for our time, though we, at least, can contain its lethal venom. And like the Athenians, some people today selfishly ignore quarantine measures to engage in base pleasures. With these prominent parallels present, we must be sure not to follow in the footsteps of foolish Athens. It is tragic to note that the Athenians were not blessed with our hindsight, nor did they possess the knowledge of the importance of balance. Thus, I end off with a powerful quote, a plea of caution and urgency from George Santayana. Those who do not read history are doomed to repeat it.